Hey everyone, welcome back to Bits and Borders, a podcast exploring frontier tech in frontier markets. We're coming to you live from the Bitso Stablecoin Conference in Mexico City. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by Ezra Kebrab, who is, I guess the second time I've met you, but I consider you a good friend already. But we met in an Uber in Sao Paulo a few weeks ago, and there's no going back from that, right? So Ezra, pleasure to have you here. Really excited for this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me, Aaron. I know we go back at this point.
Yeah. A lot of history here. A lot of history.
At this juncture, after an Uber and hanging out in multiple countries in the span of a month or so, I'll take it. Thank you for having me. My name is Ezra Kebrab, here with Caliza. Caliza, we essentially help companies with doing cross-border supplier and treasury payments. A lot of our business is originating in LATAM, so in Brazil, Mexico, and actually even the US. And we do a lot of payouts to China, Hong Kong, and even the US, where it's companies that are repatriating funds to their headquarters or paying out their exporter, right? Or paying out their counterparty.
Awesome. And so we're going to dive into that, but let's learn a bit more about you to start off with. Like, how did you get into this world of cross-border stablecoin payments in Latin America?
Certainly. It's been I'd say a winding journey to get to this juncture, but where do I start? Honestly, have been working in payments for about the greater part of 15 years now. First, I'd say endeavor right out of college. Me and four other folks, we started a peer-to-peer wallet. We ended up selling it to Square. This was in 2013. Fast forward, a few jobs later, went to then Visa, and actually it was there at Visa that I got exposed to Pix and Spay and real-time payments that are starting to really explode all around the world. But I think Brazil really was leading the charge with the central bank being very active and mandating that everyone adopt it. And you compare that to a lot of what was going on in the Western world, where we honestly are still using ACH and wires and SWIFT, and settlement times are just very different. And so I was just so fascinated by this, and honestly just very excited by how Brazil has built a lot of payment systems that we are only just starting to see now, right? Or in the last few years, like buy now, pay later, the idea of having credit and debit on the same card, the list goes on. And so while I was at Visa, numerous companies were applying to our program there, and they were looking for ways to offer virtual dollar accounts to both businesses and consumers. The ones that were looking to offer it for consumers were looking for a better way to save. And the ones that were looking to offer it for businesses, which is the one I was more kind of keyed into at that time, were actually looking for better ways to avoid breakage in payments, right? It's very common to have payments returned by the recipient because it's not with the right payment fields or whatever it might be. There are delays. And so I started to double click on this problem and realize that you'd have goods that were held at customs because the supplier never received the payment, right? And Caliza was born. Decided to leave Visa and start this about 5 years ago.
Interesting. Okay, so you've been at this for 5 years now, and with a focus on Latin America that whole time. That was like, how did you end up deciding? Was it just because of what you learned with Pix and Spay and these types of things? Like, okay, like Latin America is kind of the ground zero for this type of stuff at the moment?
Absolutely. I think it was just like a combination of Pix and Spay, and a lot of it was taken off with real-time payments, but also how difficult, despite how great domestic payments are, there was like a great chasm between how do you actually do a cross-border payment, which was a massive disparity, I would say. And I think also on top of that, just the regulatory environment being a lot more open and friendly, right, to stablecoins. Stablecoins became a part of the playbook after talking to a number of folks that convinced me when I started the company that building on traditional infrastructure was going to be challenging for the goal, right? And so always...
So you didn't even start this as like a stablecoin company. This was just a payments thing, and then you came across, stablecoins, this actually makes a lot of sense here, what we're trying to do.
So I would say when I decided to start the business, the intention was certainly payments first and just traditional. And then when I actually incorporated, that's where stablecoin came in the picture. So you're exactly right? Like it's been stablecoin from the ground up, but never without incorporating traditional banking infrastructure. It's always been, how do we marry the two? And frankly, 5 years ago, this was not a popular idea, right? A lot of banks and financial services were just thinking we're going to always steer clear of crypto. And you even noticed the vocabulary has changed, right? The way we talk about stablecoins, digital assets, you hear less of crypto, because when you hear crypto, you think of NFTs and other really use cases that are less relevant, right, to payments, essentially.
Yeah. And then, so you started Caliza 5 years ago. Maybe kind of walk us through that journey. Like, what has that been like? What's been, how have you guys kind of found product market fit? Like, what's sort of the core client profile looking like? What's any kind of numbers on like volume or any of this kind of stuff that'd be helpful to paint the picture? Would love that.
Yeah, certainly. I think a lot has evolved in space. As I mentioned early on, there was a lot of caution, right, around just like approaching digital assets. And I think a lot of it was led due to like the March events, which is what we dubbed like in the US, FTX, Silvergate Signature Bank, right? And a lot of changes in the ecosystem, even certain banks with holding reserves, right, on behalf of stablecoins like USDC. And it was a very perilous time to be in the space. And I think those that survived realized it was important to own your own infrastructure. So we decided from the early days to just go pursue our own licenses, our own banking partners, not have intermediaries in the mix. And so we've always been about being as close to the metal as possible. And so we did a lot of that investment for the first few years of building this business. And since first dollars in, right, we've consistently grown always over 40% month over month. Last month, 60%. It's been a whirlwind for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then talk a bit about just some of the traction, within the Brazil market specifically, or maybe LATAM more broadly, but like wherever you're kind of finding, is it like importers and exporters? Like what types of companies are like finding you and be like, hey, like this is what we need?
Certainly. A lot of the businesses that we end up working with are going to be a mix of customs brokers, FX brokers, anyone that has like an existing relationship with a merchant that is helping them import goods. So I'll find that some of our customers are in Santos. It's the largest port in Latin America.
Right.
And in fact, even we'll contract directly with a lot of Asian providers that are looking for better collections and even disbursements across Brazil and Mexico. So initially, a lot of that work was just joining trade associations, attending conferences and events of the like. I would say a lot of our customers are not necessarily going to be tech native or with engineering teams. So a lot of them end up using our dashboard. But we also service, I'd say, tech-forward companies that use our API. And these are going to be global brands like Flutterwave, an African payment processor, Skydo, Indian payment processor, and then also Lian, who we work with for disbursements from LATAM to China.
Okay, very cool. Oh, so you've got a full like, kind of global remit here at this point.
We started out being born in LATAM, but the goal has always been to be global in nature. And I just realized that to build this, I'd have to invest time and energy locally and on the ground. Yeah. And building out our local team and efforts.
Very cool. Yeah. And then talk a bit more about, as we're seeing, I mean, this is a kind of a theme I've been pressing into as I've been talking to folks here today in the studio. Like, you're seeing a lot of energy in the stablecoin cross-border world, right? Like pretty much probably half the companies here are doing like some kind of stablecoin cross-border payment thing of some sort. And I guess for folks like myself who don't come from like a payments background, it like some of this stuff kind of starts looking the same. It's like
understandable.
So, yeah. And I'm very curious to hear from your perspective as a guy who's like, you kind of grew up in the payments world and you know this stuff inside and out. But like, how much room for like differentiation is there among what we're seeing in this cross-border stable? I mean, there's product market fit, like we know that, but like, how much differentiation is there? Or how much segmentation is there within this world of stablecoin cross-border like orchestration or providers?
So there is a myriad of ways to answer that question. I'll try to come up with maybe one or two here. I think there is a lot of segmentation. There's a lot of niches, but I do think that ultimately stablecoins are just one piece of the puzzle, and that alone can't be the reason that a customer comes and works with you. And the reason being that, I'll give you an example. In our use cases, a lot of our customers are actually still using Swift, right? Like, I think it's interesting. Some of my counterparts or peers may say they're the Swift killer. It is on the contrary, right? I think Swift has done a remarkable job. It has a lot of challenges that it needs to overcome, but it's done a remarkable job of creating standardization for specifically supplier payments, right? I'm not talking about remittances. I'm not talking about other use cases where all you care about is the money just moving cross-border, but within supplier payments, there's certain tax codes, there's certain payment messages that need to be read by the exporter that if you don't meet that criteria, right, you're going to reach a lot of encumbrances and delays in when your goods are cleared, right, at customs for you to start servicing your merchants and the like. And so I think that nuance in the workflow is everything. And so the workflow becomes quite important, meaning how easy is it for me to deal with an invoice and the local tax codes and the local criteria for capital requirements, and just ultimately what does my supplier accept, essentially.
Interesting. So kind of differentiate. There's remittances, and then there's on this B2B side, on this cross-border side, like specifically with the supplier invoicing and payments, like there's certain things that are, like you need to kind of know the inside and out, like this specific line of this specific vertical. Otherwise, people are gonna be like, okay, like this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Like you have to kind of know this whole thing inside and out to earn the trust of the end customer.
It can be humbling, but I think you're right. It ultimately does come down to trust, and I think it's one thing to solve the customer's problems, another thing to earn that trust, and oftentimes it only comes with knowledge of their problem, and it's very precise knowledge of not just like I'm the cheapest, fastest solution. That is a prerequisite, certainly, but the other bit is, do you know what are the repercussions if this payment does not, fulfill the criteria that their counterparty needs? So yeah, I think the devil's in the details, right?
And then because it's year 2026 and every conversation turns into an AI conversation somehow, inevitably, how are you kind of thinking about there's a lot of noise right now about like agentic payments and all this kind of stuff. And it seems like, okay, this is going to be a real thing. Like, I don't know if it's real quite yet, but it seems like it's going to be a real thing. And maybe just kind of from your vantage point, how are you maybe thinking about like, okay, like how are we going to maybe include this in our roadmap, or like what should we be kind of preparing ourselves for here? Or how might this potentially help us or hurt us? Or how are you guys kind of thinking about this?
Absolutely. I think that if you are not building in any form of agentic commerce into your payout as a payment company, or sorry, I said a lot of words there. If you do not have any form of agentic commerce and how you're thinking about building your company, you're becoming a relic very fast, right? But at the same time, you're right, there's a lot of noise. And so I'll give you an example. There's a lot of talk around agentic commerce, around e-commerce, and that is fascinating. I'm very excited about that as a consumer, but it has no relevance to what I'm building today. Where you started to see the first wave of agentic payments is really not even payments itself, it was within compliance. And I think it's awesome to see what a lot of these KYB solutions are doing, which is how do I better onboard a user, make that as seamless and fast as process as possible. And I think a lot of those providers are going to have to educate regulators around that, because oftentimes regulators will say you need to have X number of personnel that are doing Y amount of compliance, and that's understandable, right? I think we're in a phase where agents and LLMs are iterating faster and making the process better. They're still not perfect, and I think it's going to just require a few iterations. Where I'm most excited, where we're doing a lot of our work right now, is really on the back office. So there's a lot of effort done on reconciliation. These are things that we get to take for granted. That's good, right? We shouldn't have to think about this on a day-to-day basis. But like when I talk about how do I help a business move money, we've talking about from Brazil to China, or from Nigeria to the US, or US to Nigeria. There are businesses that have to do this across a dozen markets, across a dozen currencies, and now you're throwing stablecoins in the mix. That actually complicates things even further. And so what I get excited about is, how do we abstract all that away? How do we abstract not just the payment, but the reconciliation, which is like, how do you help the treasury teams, the finance teams there, remove that job of knowing where their cash is sitting at any one point? That is probably one of the biggest factors to pay attention to, I'd say, in our world, I would say, of B2B payments. Yeah,
and that's also something that can be, presumably done fairly easily using agentic systems, right?
Absolutely.
It's all like that's kind of where like the immediate product market fit is with this stuff, is kind of this internal back office. Like, hey, let's just make sure everything, like record A reconciles with record B or whatever. All this kind of stuff that, it's all inside your own system, right? So it should be pretty easy to just agentify this stuff, right?
For sure.
So. Well, very cool, Ezra. Would love to just get some final thoughts from you. Anything else you want to mention that's relevant here? And, as far as milestones or timelines, looking ahead next 6 months, like what's on your roadmap? What should we be maybe expecting to see from you guys?
Great questions. We've done a lot of investment, a lot of time. We're excited to expand upon that. We'll be doing some more work within Africa, I would say. We're seeing more and more customers that are bringing us to do payouts in Asia, and with that, needs more collections across the motherland, my parents being from Ethiopia and Eritrea, I realized that there's a lot of opportunity that's bringing us to the continent that I think we'll be excited to announce in the coming months.
Okay, very cool. Well, we will keep our eyes open for that.
Absolutely.
So exciting stuff. Well, Ezra, thank you for making time for us here today,
Of course.
and wishing you best of luck. And yeah, it's awesome to catch up with you again, and on a different continent. So
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the next adventure, wherever that takes us. So maybe Antarctica, who knows?
yeah, sign me up, man. It's on my wish list. Thank you so much for joining us on Bits and Borders today. We'll be back with another episode from the Bitso Stablecoin Conference.